Hey, badass black girls, and they making big moves. Hey, badass black girls, nothing that you can't do. They are the future, I'm trying to tell ya. They want the best, no time to settle. They got the strength to handle the pressure. These are the queens, nobody better. Yeah, changing the narrative, that is imperative. They about to rock this. Tell the women that you got this. Got no time for people who are toxic. It's all love, good vibes. You know I got your back, girl. Talking issues that matter. This is badass black girl, yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Badass Black Girl. Look at this. Look at this beautiful, beautiful novel. We have the author with us today, LaTanya McQueen. Hi, LaTanya.
Hi, how are you?
Doing so great. I mean, wow. Discover. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
Congratulations.
That means a lot, actually, because we went through some drafts. So, so thank you. Thank you for saying that.
I mean, I love it so much. I love the feel of the book, and Ah, I'm excited for you, excited for the people who are going to get to read this book. Well, I feel like I'm jumping the guns. Let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm LaTanya McQueen. I am a writer of fiction and nonfiction. This book is my first novel. I wrote an essay collection a couple years ago that was published through a small press about Black female identity, and it weaves folklore, biblical passages, history, and my own personal experience. I have an M.F.A. from Emerson College. I have a PhD from the University of Missouri. I teach English and creative writing courses in a small liberal arts college right now in Iowa. I don't know what else. I have a very needy labradoodle. So hopefully he's asleep right now. So hopefully hopefully he won't start whining. Sometimes, I've been doing a lot of Zooms and he wants attention, but and I don't know what else other people want to know about me. I write all kinds of things, so it's hard to kind of break that down. I don't know what else. What else can I say, or what else do you think people would want to know?
Where are you located? You said Iowa, right?
I'm in Iowa. I've lived all over though. I grew up in Kentucky, near Fort Knox military base, and then my family's from North Carolina, which is partly so the book that I wrote is set in North Carolina, so connection there. I lived in Boston for a really long time, and then I did my PhD in Missouri, in Columbia, Missouri. And now I'm in Iowa. I'm in Cedar Rapids, so it's about 30 minutes from Iowa City.
How is it to live in Iowa? I visited it once. I visited a friend who was attending college there, and I only spent a weekend. How is it to live there?
Where were you in Iowa? Were you in Iowa City?
I was in Iowa City, spent the weekend. I remember we went ball hopping. Um,
Mhm.
I was really young. It was during my college years, and I remember it was different. I lived in Miami half of my life, so it
Okay.
was
Very
the
different.
music was different. Ball hopping was different.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been to Miami, so yeah. Cedar Rapids is a little bit different than Iowa City. Iowa City is very much a college town. Cedar Rapids is more working class. There's a lot of factories here. The General Mills factory is here. And so there's like every morning when I take my dog out, it smells like the crunch berries. I like Iowa. Like I came here from Missouri, and Missouri. This is not to say that Iowa isn't racist, but like Missouri was racist in a way that was more palpable, and here it's a little more subdued. Um, it's really white, also. Um, But it's not, I mean, it's one of the more peaceful places I've lived. So that's been nice. You know, it's an okay place. It's very Midwestern. It's very, I don't know. I would just say it's very, it's very Midwestern. But I like it, you know. It's kind of a mix. And I like being also too, because it's near Iowa City. And so I think that brings, like, I'm close enough so that there's access to literary culture in Iowa City, but I'm far enough away so I don't have to deal with the students. Cedar Rapids is primarily, it's just a working class city, and it's not like college towns. You don't have that sort of vibe, right? And so it's nice. I mean, it's okay. It's not Miami though. Like there's nowhere near as exciting as Miami.
Yeah, Miami was too exciting for me. I actually moved away. I'm in Orlando now, which is
Oh,
quiet. I mean, we have the parks, but I'm far away from the touristic um, area. So I'm okay with quiet. I like the quiet.
I mean, it's pretty quiet. It's pretty quiet here. The only things, I mean, it's kind of, there's some things that I missed in terms of like living in a city. But I don't know, you get used to it. Chicago is also too not that far. So, you know, if it's too much, I can just drive to Chicago.
Right. Well, let's talk about the setting of your book. Let's talk about your book. Let's talk about the main character first.
Okay.
Tell us about, no spoilers.
Okay.
I'm certainly not asking for spoilers, but tell us a little bit about how the idea for the book came to you, and your choice of characterization and setting. Why those specific choices? And you might, just to put everything in context for people who don't know you yet, but everyone's gonna get this book very soon. Tell us a little bit about what the book is about, and then the specific choices that you made and what guided you to make them.
Okay, so there's several questions here. Okay, so the book is, just have been describing it as a literary Southern Gothic horror with elements of speculative. It's centered on this woman named Mira, who is Black, and in the present of the narrative, she is going back to her hometown of Gibson to attend the wedding of her childhood best friend Celine, who's white. The wedding is being held on a plantation that has recently been renovated to give guests an antebellum-esque experience, complete with reenactments. The plantation also too has been rumored to be haunted by the ghosts of slaves who are seeking vengeance on the descendants of those who once owned them. So that's sort of the larger premise. So Mira's going back. She's also, I mean, she's going back under this pretense to see her childhood best friend, but she also too wants to get reacquainted with this other friend of hers who she used to have a crush on, named Jessie, who's Black. And who when they were younger, they snuck onto the plantation, and some things happened that sort of caused both of the trajectory of both of their lives to change. So that's sort of the gist. In terms of how I came up with it, that's a little bit of a harder question because there's a couple of different pieces. I was working on another book, like I was working on the essay collection, or I was thinking about working on an essay collection at the time, and I went down as part of that book. One of the things that I wanted to do, I have this ancestor who my great grandmother, who was a slave to this senator in North Carolina, and I wanted to find out more about her life and what her life was like living on a plantation. And so I decided to visit a bunch of them in the South. And so I went to a number of them in North Carolina or in the Carolinas, and then in Louisiana. I drove through a couple of Mississippi, but I didn't tour them. And I visited these places, and after I visited them, I couldn't let go of the experience of visiting them because they center on, they don't center on slavery really at all. If they talk about it, it's an afterthought. They center on white experience. A lot of them can be very much like these like tourist attractions. And they center on whiteness, on the white audiences. They do the things like a lot of the things that I mentioned in the book. It wasn't too far off. So like they will have people dress up in costume. Sometimes they will have not so far as there were some of them, they did have reenactments. They pitch these places as like, they're worthy of visiting and seeing because of the fact that the owners were wealthy. And so that in and of itself makes them worthy of remembrance and worthy of being known and being appreciated. And so that's sort of what these places are. And so I couldn't let that go. And so part of the book came from inspiration from that. Part of it came also too, I was wanting to write a book about specifically the white gaze and how it affects a character's sense of self. I thought it would be interesting to use this larger horror premise to talk about the white gaze. So like this larger idea of slaves seeking vengeance or seeking revenge, right, on descendants, like that is a horror premise, but it is one that's like predicated on white fear of Black people. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that in a book, well, in these like several different layers, like looking at how the white gaze operates, if that makes sense, right? Because you have this character who is very much affected by the white gaze and has altered her own sense of self. And then there's like the viewer or the reader reading the book and how depending on their own experiences, it alters like certain aspects of how they're viewing it. But then also too, there's this larger, like the horror premise, which was also too like thinking about the white gaze. So that's a very long answer. I don't think I answered all your questions either, like the third part too, right? About the characters and then place. I think I sort of got there, right? Because like Mira, like all of these characters are affected about, like all these characters are thinking about how they're being seen, and they change their behavior, and they do things based off of that. So I was interested in that. And then also too, like your relationship to a place, and your relationship to other people. So some people, it's been interesting because like some people read this book and right away they feel like it's a horror novel, and then there are others that read it and they're like, oh well, it's not really horror, or it's too slow, or it's too and I think a lot of like how people are reading it, it's dependent on their own experiences. Like it feels like those who read it as horror really like they get it really quickly, or those who know, right, who have this history with plantations. When I was at the University of Missouri doing my PhD, there was like kind of midway through, there were the Black the Black students, like there was like this Black organization on campus, and one of the things that they wanted to do was to try to create this marker on near the campus for a lynching that had occurred a couple of decades ago. And the lynching one of the reasons why the lynching was significant is because it was a number of the school faculty and staff took part, and it was also the person being lynched was an employee of the school. but there was no marker for this. And I remember sort of thinking when they were talking about it, like the spot where they wanted to put the marker near where it happened, I would go by there every day, and I would drive by it every day to go to class or to go teach or something, and I never knew. And I thought a lot about how Missouri specifically, like I thought a lot about how there were spaces, there were things that had happened. There was the legacy of things that had happened, and you would see traces of it, but there were never markers, or there was never acknowledgement of like of the history. There was an area of this city where it was really desolate, and I always sort of wondered why, because it was close to downtown. I always sort of wondered why nothing was over there. And then I read about urban renewal and like basically the decimation of like Black communities that were in that area. So I just began, and then also too on the campus there's also a plantation on the campus, but it had been renovated, and now it was like a sorority house or fraternity or something. So I guess for me, oftentimes I am looking at spaces and I'm thinking about what the history is and how much of that history has been erased or been revised, and how much of that has shaped what exists now, but then also too how much of that has shaped how I think about the world, how I look at the world, how it has shaped other people. Even here in Iowa, like sometimes I do this assignment with my students. I have them like research sundown towns in their community or where they grew up. And a lot of them are from places that were once sundown towns, and they have no idea. And they have never thought about like why their communities are pretty much all white and why there's no diversity. And I'm like, well, it's because of the legacy of this, right? And so that's the thing. And I guess connecting it back to the book, like for Celine, she's having this wedding on this plantation, but to her, she doesn't have that same history with it. Like she doesn't look at it and see it as this place of horror. She has no connection to it in the same way that Mira and Jesse do. She's looking at it and it is a representation of status, of wealth, as a means to an end. She wants to be accepted by this class group, and this is her way to do it, by having this wedding here. So that is her association with it, and that's how she's thinking of it. So it's the question that I try to ask in the book, right? Is she a bad person then because she has this different association? And thinking about that. I wanted to originally be a journalist, and that's what I had started. That's what I went to school for. And then midway through, I took the classes that I took. I hated it. I hated it. And then so I went to Emerson. It's like a media and art school. And so then I thought I would just go into publishing and then maybe kind of write on the side. I was interested in writing, but also too, it was one of those things where realistically in my mind, I wasn't sure how it would work. And so I was interested, but I didn't really, I don't know, it was always a thing that was on the back burner, I guess. It wasn't really until after I graduated and then the financial crisis happened, and then my mother died, and then I just decided I would just try, because there were no jobs, and so I decided I would try to do an M.F.A. and write for a couple of years. And I I don't know, like it's interesting because like I never thought I would I never thought I would really get here, but I hoped, and I think what kept me going were a couple things. One, it's some piece of me, I felt like I was good enough. I didn't know if I would ever get there, but I felt like I was good enough to get there. And so having that belief helps. But also too, like I'm a Black person. I don't have much of a safety net. And I knew if I was to try to kind of pursue this, that I would really have to do it and to work and just, and so, I mean, it's been hard. It's also been a long time. It's been like, over 10 years, me trying to write. Books, favorite books. That's a good question too. I read all kinds of things. I don't know. I'm somebody who, I'm always trying to do something that's different than what I've done before. And so I read all kinds of stuff. When I was growing up, it's interesting because this book is a horror, and I was trying to kind of think about it, and I was like, I don't know if I read a lot of horror, but I guess I did, but not like traditional horror. I read things like Joyce Carol Oates, who sort of writes, sometimes kind of writes into horror. I read a lot of like just things I don't know if you've ever read these. Did you ever read those like B.C. Andrews novels? Those very genre-y, sort of, I don't know if they're pulpy, but like very like formulaic because it's a ghostwriter writing them. But like those are super horror.
Right.
But I read those when I was really young. I was probably like, 10 or 11 years old. And then I read them and so.
And then you wonder, how can someone write so many books? And then, yeah.
I know. And then you're like, oh, ghostwriter, this makes sense. So, I think those maybe had an effect. But I read all kinds of things now. Like when I first started writing, I wanted to do like historical stuff. And that, has had an influence, I think, in the book. And in some ways, a journalistic impulse too. It's just trying to kind of like, there is a sort of larger message point, right? So I think that's also too influenced it. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your role models.
That's a good question. That's a hard question for me. I think I have a godmother who teaches at Emory. And I think in terms of how to pursue a career in academia, I think she's been helpful in that regard. And in terms of writing, that's trickier because I've had, and this is not to say that I haven't had good teachers. I've had good teachers. I've had teachers who have supported me in some ways. But I don't know if I've ever been truly mentored in the way that I think other writers have. Nor have I had a in-person creative writing community. I had to find a lot of that online. I had to find a lot of that through meeting people on Twitter or Facebook or something in groups, and messaging writers that I liked. I did that a lot, where I would just read things in journals, and I would like something, and then I'd message the writer, and then we became friends. In the acknowledgements of my book, a lot of those writers are people I've never met in person, but they've been people who've helped my career and have helped me. So yeah, that would be. So I guess my larger point, I guess, is that if somebody is a writer or they want to write, there is this tendency to want to feel like you need to go into a creative writing program or to do some sort of like community thing, and you don't, or like a class or something, and you don't necessarily have to do that. You can find people online. It takes some time, but you can find them. So when I talk about this book, and it sounds like best case scenario, I wrote this novel. I wrote it very quickly. I wrote it within the first draft within 3 months. And I was doing a fellowship. I was doing like a creative writing fellowship. And so I wrote it at the tail end of the first year of that. And I wrote a first draft, and then I queried agents, which you shouldn't do, but I did because I had gotten really tired and frustrated at that point. And then I got an agent somehow, and then we revised it over the next year, and then we went on sub, and it was about a month in, and then it got sold. So that story sounds really great and exciting, and it's like best case scenario and like really like a tight timeline, right? But the reality is that like I have been writing for like, I did a creative writing undergraduate degree, basically. And then I graduated in 2006. So from 2006, and then I did an MFA in 2007. So from 2007 to now, that's what, how many years is that? What, like, I can't do math. This is what it would be, 2006, 10, what, 15 years or so. So in all of that time, I've been trying to write things, trying to write a book. I wrote a story collection. I couldn't get an agent for. I got close a couple times, but they didn't want to rep it. I wrote another novel during the PhD, and I couldn't get an agent for that. Came close, but the agents, the way in which they wanted me to think about the book was not what I wanted to do. I've written all kinds of things, and then also too, in that large span of time, it was working crappy jobs. I've worked at Borders, I've worked at Walmart, I've worked at Cheers in Boston, where everybody knows her name. I worked at I substitute taught. I was always really struggling, never had any money, and it was always sort of trying to write in between this hustle. And it was difficult and hard, and so I guess in terms of advice for this, I don't know, that wasn't part of your question, but like in terms of advice, the thing that I tell my students a lot is that you need to sort of figure out what this is going to look like for you, what writing, like having writing in your life, what is that going to look like for you? And then what can you do? What can you do? What can you change in your life that is going to make this successful for you in terms of being able to keep writing? Some people can do it with a 9-to-5 job. I probably could have gotten a 9-to-5 job, but like it just didn't happen. And then they write before the 9-to-5 job. Some people, they need large chunks of time. Some people, they need the community aspect of an M.F.A. program or these classes. But anyway, so in terms of struggle, that like it's been financial struggle, it's been time struggle. In terms of writing the book, I struggle a lot with I think like everybody does, like feelings of insecurity, right? The longer that it went in terms of not selling or not getting a book deal, the harder it is to keep going. You just sort of have to find a way to have the writing be enough, because there's always, even if you get like a book, there's always going to be stuff that like you compare, and there's always going to be things that like, if you want to feel bad about yourself, there's always like things. So you just have to let the writing be enough and find a way to have it be in your life or to integrate it in your life.
I love the fact that you started by sharing a success story. I feel that I need to keep showing the cover because I really love it. I love it. I really, really do. Tell us a little bit about the collection of essays.
So I mentioned my great grandmother. She was the slave to this man named M.F.A. Brown, who's a North Carolina senator. There has been a story told in my family that my ancestor, her name was Leanna Brown, that she had this relationship with this white man who was on a neighboring farm, and that she had 3 children with him. And one of the children, she was able to somehow take to court to make it so that he would carry the name of his father. So my family's name is Siddle, and they're the only ones that are named Siddle, and they really shouldn't be. They should be Brown, but they became Siddle because of this thing that she did. And so part of what I wanted to do is to figure out attempt to figure out the truth of that story. Some of the reasons for why, also too, my family has struggled a lot with their own, on my mother's side, they have struggled a lot with like their own Black identity. Their colorism issues, some of them have a lot of self-hate. And my mother had it too. And I wanted to figure out, for some reason in my mind, I thought if I looked at the truth of this story, it would somehow make all these other pieces of my family's history and my mother's actions make sense, if that makes sense. I also too, my mother, growing up, she was very abusive. Growing up also too, there was always this, like my mother she mentioned a lot about also too being abused. There was a question of whether or not she'd been sexually abused. She always hinted at it, but she never explicitly said. And so for me, somehow in my mind, I felt like if I tried to kind of think about the truth of the story, it would answer these questions in terms of my family's history, but also to me, like in my own struggles with my own identity. I was also living in Missouri, and it was like Missouri was really the first time. Before then, I lived in Boston, and Boston, like everybody tries really hard to kind of give this appearance of not being racist, even though they are. And then I grew up in Kentucky, and it was racist in Kentucky, but the school that I went to was very diverse. And so it was sort of, a lot of ways, I was like shrouded from a lot of racism that I really got when I went to the University of Missouri in like in my face sort of way. And so I was thinking a lot about what it meant to be a Black person a Black woman in the world. And so I just wanted to write a book about it. Or I wanted to write an essay about it, and what would happen is I would write an essay, and then I would get it published, and then I would think, oh, well, maybe I should write another essay, and then I write another essay, and then it would get published or get bought pretty much immediately. And then after a while, I was like, maybe I'm writing a book. So that's sort of that idea. And there's parallels too between the essay collection and the novel, right?
Tell us a little bit about what's next.
Oh gosh, what's next? I am working on another book. It's hard because I'm somebody who I can never work on the thing that I need to at the time that I need to do it. It's always really frustrating. So I'm trying to work on another novel. I was really interested in I've been trying to sort of figure out a way to integrate the story of the sterilizations that happened in North Carolina of Black women, right? And so I'm trying to figure out a way to integrate that into a novel. So that's what I'm doing right now. But also too, I've been thinking about essays again. And so I just haven't, I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place. So this is a terrible answer. In terms of to find me, I'm pretty active on Twitter. I'm not so much active on the other social media handles because it's just overwhelming, I think. Plus, I don't know how exciting I am in terms of like Instagram or something. But I am on Twitter. You can find me. I don't know what else. What else? No. Oh, like you said, like lasting thoughts or advice, right? I will say with this book, I think part of why it went so fast for me is because I finally got to a place where I knew what I wanted to do. And I just said, I'm going to sit down and this is what I'm going to do. And this is it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least like I did what I set out to do. I think in the past, I've struggled a lot with like doing things or writing things that I thought people expected me to write. And I would get hung up on that and frustrated with that. With this book, I just was like, this is just what I'm going to do. And then it works out. Hopefully it works out. So I guess that's my advice, is just to always sort of just come to like always think about the work and what it is that you're trying to say, and have that be enough.
Have that be enough. I love those final words. Thank you so much, LaTanya, for coming today and talking to us. I wish you the best of luck with the book. You deserve it. And I will continue to follow your success. And hopefully you'll come back and spend more time with us.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be fun. Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Until next time.
Okay, all right, bye.
Bye.